video, audio, or still image of video recording of this meeting is strictly forbidden without the written permission of the Amity School District Board of School Directors. May I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Fisher? Here. Mr. Keeper?
Here.
Mrs. Kehoe? Here. Mr. Kowal? Mrs. Locker? Here. Mrs. Mylan? Here. Mr. Sass?
Here.
Mrs. Smith? Mr. Angus?
Here.
7 members present.
Thank you. Can you read the Sunshine Law, please?
Section 708 of the Sunshine Law permits agencies to hold executive sessions to discuss employment and personnel matters, labor relations and arbitration matters, purchase or lease of real estate up to the time an option or agreement is obtained, litigation or potential litigation, and other agency business which, if discussed in public, would violate lawful privilege or would violate confidentiality laws. The Board of School Directors held an executive session on Wednesday, August 9th, 2017, and Wednesday, August 16th, 2017, to discuss employment and personnel matters, salary schedule, and labor relations.
Thank you. Is there any correspondence this evening?
There is no correspondence.
Thank you. May I have a motion to accept or correct the minutes of the meet and discuss meeting for July 19th, 2017, and the board meeting on July 19th, 2017? Thank you, Mrs. Mylan. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. May I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report dated July 2017?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Keeper. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Walker. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Are there any amendments to the agenda for this evening? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented for this evening?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Walker. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mylan. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? At this time, we're going to break. The board will be going down to have some seats, and I'm going to turn the floor over to our solicitor, who's going to do a presentation on the Act 88 panel decision.
Good evening. As probably all of you know, I'm Hobie Webster. My law firm serves the school district as solicitor. What we have for you this evening is a presentation on really an update on the negotiations process between the Ambridge Area Education Association, which is the teachers union, and the school district, and the collective bargaining negotiation process that we've been engaged in for a little over 2 years. The most important thing to remember tonight is I'm not here to advocate for the district's position. Yes, I work for the board. Yes, my firm is the lead negotiator. But what I'm going to try to do this evening is provide neutral information about the process that we've gone through and the decision that was issued by the arbitration panel on August 11th, so that people understand what we did, who was involved, and what the result was. But most important, if you leave with nothing else, what I would ask you to do is read the report for yourself. The report that was issued by the panel is available on the school district website. It's available in the offices of each of the buildings. It's 10 pages long, but the first 7 pages really just compare side by side the different proposals, healthcare, salary, things like that. And there's really only about 3 pages of, writing that's in paragraph form. So it's something that's pretty easily digestible, it's very accessible, and rather than listen to me or listen to what's being put out in the media or by the association, you can read it for yourself and draw your own conclusions. And I think that's probably the most valuable thing that each of us can do in order to understand really what's at stake here and how we got involved in this process in the first place. Finally, the last slide is a Q&A slide. So if you have questions as we go through this, if you could save them until the end, we'll go through all the questions. I'll answer every question that I can. If you ask me something that I don't know, I'll give you my email address. We can follow up so that you get the information that you need. If you think of something after we're done or tomorrow you please reach out to the superintendent, pass your questions to her, she'll get them to me, and we'll get an answer to you as quickly as we can. So the first thing is kind of understanding how we got here. The current collective bargaining agreement expired on June 30th, 2015. Beginning in January of 2015, the school district and the association began the negotiating process. Obviously, that didn't work. So we've met a number of times over the last 2 years to try to reach a resolution. And ultimately, in December of 2016, which was last December, after a year and a half, almost 2 years of negotiations, the teachers gave the school district a notice that they intended to exercise their right to strike. As probably everyone in this room remembers well, that strike lasted about 3 weeks. The way that strikes work in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is actually one of the few states that allows teachers to strike. Teachers in an initial strike in a school year can strike for as many days as will still allow the school district to have 180 days of instruction prior to June 15th. So there's not a set number of days. It really depends on how the school's calendar lays out and when exactly the strike begins. So last year it was about 3 weeks because they went in the middle of the year, and that had the effect of pushing days back until June 15th. After an initial strike, the law requires that one of the two sides ask for what's called non-binding, last best final non-binding arbitration. And in, I believe, February of 2017, the school district issued a notice that they intended to go through with that process. And I'd like to just talk, I know it's a little bit lawyerly and maybe a little boring, but I think it's helpful to understand how that process works. So the first thing to understand is it's a panel of 3 arbitrators. Each of the two sides, the employer, which in this case is the school district, and the union, which in this case is the education association, get to appoint 1 member each. The school district selected an attorney named Mike Palumbo. The association selected a UNISERV representative, a PSEA employee named Justin Matalini. Those two sides, each partisan arbitrator, as I would think of it, choose a neutral arbitrator mutually. They get together and they say, who do we want to be the 3rd member of our panel? It's mutually selected by both parties, and that neutral arbitrator, the neutral, serves as the chair of the panel. And really, the best way to think about how this process works is each side has to, through their appointed member on the panel, convince the neutral arbitrator that their side's position is the one that should be adopted, the most reasonable, the most financially responsible, and that's really the goal of this process. Now, an arbitration panel has 3 options. They can choose, the employer's contract offer, the union's contract offer, or they can choose a fact finding, which in our case was issued about a year before we got to the arbitration process that we're going to talk about tonight. And the fact finder, as they usually do, kind of split, down the middle. They chose some things from the district's proposal, they chose some things from the association's proposal, and in the view of both parties ended up with something that really didn't work for either one of us. But so the panel has 3 options: employer, district, fact finder, or union. And the way it works is it's a lot like kind of an informal trial setting. You have the 3 arbitrators. They have an arbitration hearing, which in this case happened on April 10th, 2017, which was this spring. And each side, the district, presented their last, best, and final contract offer. And the association presented their last, best, and final contract offer. And each side presented witnesses, exhibits, and provided testimony to the panel to try to convince them that each side's position was the right one, okay? And the way that process normally works is there's a period of deliberation, and after that process is finished, after 20 days after the record's closed, the panel has to issue its decision. Now in this case, as is frequently the case, the record was left open. And the reason that was done was for 2 reasons. First was to try to get additional information from the parties about their proposal and questions that the panel had about what each side had suggested. and that takes time. And then also, in this case, each side agreed to the neutral arbitrator that we should try to find a way to settle it through this process, settle the contract through this process. And so what the arbitrator, the neutral, instructed each side to do through their appointed representative was gather additional information, go back to your side, and come up with a revised last best final. So over the last several months, many times throughout the summer, the district, and specifically the board, the negotiations team, and the administration have met, trying to find a way to move a little bit closer to where we think the association is going to find an offer acceptable. I don't speak for the association. I'm sure they went through a similar process. But the board spent hours and hours over months in executive sessions and special negotiation sessions trying to find ways that we could move our key sticking points. And they're the same ones you'd guess they would be: salary, healthcare, retirement benefits. That's really what this is all about. We wanted to try to find ways, if we could, that would maintain board support, that were reasonable, that were financially responsible, and that were fair to the teachers. And so going through that process, we came up with a revised last best and final offer. The last best, if you want to think of it that way. And so what we did, just like the EA, we gave that revised proposal to the arbitration panel. And once we got those revised proposals to the neutral arbitrator at the end of July, they've decided at that point to close the record formally, which triggered the 20 days that the arbitration panel has to issue its decision. Okay, and that was issued on July 21st, I think, is when both sides' last best were received. And as I indicated a minute ago, on August 11th, the panel issued a majority decision finding on behalf of the school district. They selected the school district's offer. I'm not going to get into why they did that. The arbitration panel laid out its reasoning very clearly, and you can read that for yourself, and I encourage you to do so. All I'll say about what they concluded was that they found the district's offer to be the most reasonable and financially feasible offer on the table given the financial and budgetary realities the district faces. Beyond that, read it for yourself, okay? But what I'd like to do, though, is talk a little bit about the process. What was in the offer, right, and what happens next. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the details of the revised last best final offer that the district put on the table, that the arbitration panel recommends that the EA approve. All right, so the first thing that everyone always wants to talk about is salary. So the best way to think about what's happened in the last 2 years is a salary freeze, right? When a contract expires, you go into what's called status quo, and that means everyone's salary that's in that bargaining unit stays exactly the same, doesn't move at all. Ordinarily, bargaining unit employees, and particularly teachers, move through a salary schedule. They move from down here, they go up a box, they go up a box, they go up a box, based on years of service, and in this case, also educational attainment. Okay, but when you're in status quo after the contract expires, that does not happen. You could get 3 more years of experience in status quo and a doctorate, and your salary is not going to change until you get a new contract. Okay, so for the last 2 years, and we're now into the 3rd year since June 30, 2015, salaries for EA members, which are teachers, their salaries have been frozen at exactly what they were when the contract expired. Okay. So one of the first things everyone wants to know is what's going to happen to salary. The proposal that the district put on the table is to move all employees up 3 spaces if the contract is approved this fiscal year, and specifically before the 22nd of August. Okay, so what does that mean? Try to talk about it in general terms, then I'm going to provide you some specific salary numbers so you can, I'm not good with numbers, so I have to see really what the salary numbers are and what that really means. But if you are a new teacher who's hired on step 1, you're going to go to step 4, okay? If you're in the middle of the career and you're on step 10 when the contract expired on June 30th, you go to step 13. Now, on top of that step movement, which they would realize immediately, the district has added $750 on scale for this first year that we're in right now, which is the 2017-2018 academic year. So you get $750 on scale. And on top of that, in an attempt to try to make up for the wages that were lost in the 2-year frozen period, we're offering a one-time $750 lump sum bonus payment off scale. So everybody moves forward 2 years to catch them up where they would be, and we're adding $750 to the scale, and we're adding a $750 bonus. And then for the 2018-2019 year, we're adding, everyone gets step movement, so they move on that scale, and they get $900 on that scale. Not as a bonus, but part of their base salary. And then the last year of the contract, which is 2019-2020, everyone moves on the schedule, up the scale, and they get $900 added to that step schedule. Okay? Now we'll talk a little bit about what that actually means in terms of, real dollars. Okay. So for a teacher who was on step 1 on June 30th, 2015, when the contract went into status quo, their salary was $40,242. Under the district's proposal, which was recommended by the arbitration panel, that salary jumps to $40,087 right now this year. Oh, I'm sorry, $49,087, I apologize. I told you I wasn't good at numbers, there's proof right there. $49,087. So that's the salary. They would go from $40,000, which is what they're going to be paid. When they get paid this year, if we stay in status quo, they're going to jump immediately $9,000. That's real money. Okay. Now, at the end of the contract, their base salary would be $53,629. So someone who today, in the status quo period, who was employed on June 30th, 2015, made $40,000, they're jumping up to over $53,000. On top of that, recognizing the status quo and the frozen wages, the school district's also, as I said before, giving them $750 this year to try to make that transition a little bit easier. So when you add those numbers up, that step 1 employee is going to be making nearly $50,000. They're going to go from a shade over 40 to just under 50. And that could happen now, if they approve this contract. The step 10 teacher, that's kind of, a middle career person. Someone's been in the district about 10 years, give or take. That person currently makes $56,551. Under the district's proposal that was approved by the arbitration panel, that goes to $61,407. And then on top of that, those middle career employees, just like everyone else, gets that $750 bonus. And at the end of the contract, the 2019-2020 year, their salary would be up to $65,943. So, just like those teachers at the lowest end, they're looking at gaining $9,000 in change, moving through these steps, really over the last 3 years. Okay. And this is a very timely little point here. The handouts show you this salary schedule. Okay, there's a document that looks just like this. You can get it. I really highly recommend that you read. If you don't have a copy, please grab one. You can have mine if they're out. It's really important that people see these numbers because it really provides you a very clear. And the district's proposal in this last best revised offer, we substantially moved off the position that we had previously been in, substantially. What the district proposed in the last final best offer that was approved by the arbitration panel was 5% of that premium this year, 6% next year, and 7% the final year of the contract. What that means is the district is going to pay 95% of the premium this year, 94% next year, and 93% in the final year. And putting that in dollar terms for the family premium, that would be $74.60 per month in the first year at 5%, $89.52 in next year, and $104.44 in the final year of the contract. So per month, and it's per month relative to the $25 that they currently pay. Okay, so in a biweekly paycheck, you're paying about half of that, out of your biweekly check. But those are the numbers. So I think that does matter because the percentages get a little bit weird. But $74.60 is the most anybody's going to pay for family coverage per month. And again, that premium is $17,904. And I promise not to advocate, and I'm not going to do that. I just wanted to briefly address one thing, though. I read today on the Ambridge Connection website that there was a statement, I think, issued that the proposal the district put forward would ask the teachers to pay more in contributions toward their healthcare premium than administrators pay and than any other district employees pay, and that's incorrect. The superintendent's contract requires her to pay 13% of her premium, okay? Now, 13%. The Act 93 plan, which is on the agenda to be approved tonight by the board, that's the compensation package that we offer administrators, so principals, director of operations, all the administrators. Their healthcare contribution this year is 10%. It's a 5-year agreement. 10% this year, 11% next year, 12% the year after that, 13% and 13%. So not only are teachers not paying more than other employees for that same premium healthcare coverage, they're actually paying about half at the most, okay? So I didn't see that quote attributed to anyone, but I think it's really important, like I said, that we operate off the same facts, So that's something I think everyone should walk away from here, read the report and remember that the teachers are not being asked to pay more than other employees. They're being asked to pay a lot less. And one of the other sticking points is the retirement incentive. The district's proposal for retirement incentive in the approved plan is to give teachers with 30 years of service in the district or 20 years of service and age 55, $3,500 a month for 3 years, which we paid into a 403B account, which is a reserve account that can be used for certain healthcare-related retirement expenses, things like that. Okay, so they'll presumably be drawing their PSERS pension, and we will put $3,500 a month as an additional incentive for them to retire if they meet this criteria. They also have the ability to buy into the district's insurance coverage if they choose to do so. It's not required, but they'll have the option. The one thing to remember is the school district has the right to decide when to offer that, right? So that's something that I think does need to be pointed out in fairness. Our proposal was, if we offer one based on the types of employees we're likely to get, the number of employees, our staffing levels, things like that, this is what it will be. But we don't have to offer it. So, in perfect candor, that's something that everyone needs to understand. But there's still a retirement incentive built in there. We're still going to pay them money for 3 years, thousands of dollars, if they decide to retire early. Okay? Now, I hope that as you're hearing these numbers and seeing this proposal, you're thinking to yourself, this is a really good deal. We feel like we've put a very aggressive offer out there, something that we hope the EA will decide to adopt. We think this is a fair offer and a good offer. We think it's a financially reasonable offer and the best offer that this school district can make to its teachers. But as with anything, some people are going to benefit a little bit more than others, right? And in this case, we know from looking at the salary schedule that about 142 of the 186 bargaining unit members are going to see really substantial increases. What we talked about before, $9,000, $10,000 over the life of this contract. Other teachers, the most senior teachers, the top 40, are going to see benefits, but they're going to be smaller. Okay, so they're going to get $750 on scale this year. They're still going to get the $750 bonus. And because they're at the top of the scale, they get the $900 on scale and the $900 on scale. But they don't get step movement because there's no more steps to go up. So they're still seeing thousands of dollars more than they have in the existing contract, but it isn't as much benefit as what's provided to the other younger employees. Now, and this should be noted as well, it's still a lot more than the contributions. No one is going to end up behind. Everyone's going to have more money in their pocket every year of this deal, including the premium contributions increases, than they would have under the existing salary proposal. So 142 people are going to see really, really big benefits out of 186. We think that's a fair plan design. We think that's reasonable given all the different realities. And we hope that the majority of the members in the EA see this and decide everyone benefits and most of us benefit an awful lot and decide to go forward with this proposal. Now, what happens at the end of this process? As I mentioned, the arbitration decision was issued on August 11th. The way the law reads, each side, if neither side votes down this contract offer, after 10 days, the contract offer becomes final. So the new contract is this proposal. In practical terms, what that means is the EA has 10 days from the date this was issued on August 11th to vote the proposal down, or this proposal becomes final. Okay? We don't get to decide when they vote or how they vote. We've been told informally that they plan to have some meetings as early as later this week to decide whether or not they're going to vote to approve this contract. If they decide to vote this contract offer down, if they decline it, okay, they can then issue a strike notice. We're into a new school year, so that means they have the right to give us 48 hours notice that they intend to strike, and they will be able to strike until it would cause us to be unable to get 180 days of instruction by June 15th. Now, the way that process works, when they actually go on strike, we reach out to the Pennsylvania Department of Education and say, here's our calendar, here's the strike notice, how long can they stay out, and they'll issue a decision, okay? You'd be surprised, it seemed like it was something pretty straightforward, but even last year, it gets a little screwy with PDE. But we think they're probably looking at a solid month. I mean, I hate to throw those kind of things out there, but it's important that folks understand what could really be at stake if there was another strike. Given how early we are in the year, they could probably strike for a month. We hope that doesn't happen. We hope they accept the offer. But they are set to potentially vote as early as Friday, as we understand it. Now, we hope that they won't vote it down. And on the agenda this evening, the board is going to vote to affirm the decision. We don't have an obligation to do that, but we think it's important that the public understands where this board is on this issue. And we're very proud of this proposal, and we want to signal to the community and the taxpayers and to the teachers, the EA, that we want them to know that this is a real offer. These numbers are here. All you have to do is say yes, and we have a deal. We can have labor peace. We can avoid a strike. We can get people paid because they haven't been paid in 2 years. There's real opportunity here. And so, when I finish up here, we're going to start the meeting back up, and you're going to see this board take action to publicly vote in favor of this proposal. And you've all seen the details of it. I think a reasonable person looks at this and says, this is a fair offer. And we hope that that's the approach the EA takes as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to any questions. Let's start with the public, and then if the board or the administration or anybody has any questions about anything that I've put in here, feel free to ask. Anybody? Anything?
Is there anyone here from the Education Association? What, if anything, what's your timetable? Are you going to stick to the 10 days here? Are you going to vote? What's your process? Excuse me? Meeting tomorrow. Are you going to take a vote, or are you just going to meet tomorrow? I'm not sure.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, if you think of something, over the next few days, reach out to Dr. Welter. She'll either answer the question on her own, or she'll reach out to us and we'll get you that information. But make sure to read the report. Don't read the district press release. Don't read the union press release. Don't read the newspaper, although those are all fine sources. Read the report yourself. You can draw your own conclusions about what this really means for people. Okay? Thanks.
Alrighty, I'd like to take a moment to thank Hobie for his presentation. I think it was well put together and drives home the point. At this point, I'd like to continue with the agenda for this evening. Next up would be public comment regarding agenda items only. At this time, district residents may come forward to comment on agenda items only. Each person must state their first and last name and address prior to speaking. Each resident will be allowed 3 minutes and can speak only once. This period for public comment prior to the standing committee reports will be limited to 1/2 hour. Although not required, board members desiring to address questions or concerns may do so after the resident's question or comment or at the conclusion of the committee reports. There will still be an opportunity for residents to comment on any business relevant to the school district under old and new business at the end of the meeting. So at this point, I'll open the floor up to anybody for any questions on the agenda items this evening.
Mike Andrews, Economy Borough. Under Education and Technology Back to School, I'd like to know what the enrollment for each school is going to be, the number of students this year versus last year, and is the total where does the total enrollment fall, plus or minus versus last year?
Dr. Waller, do you have that information?
I can get those numbers for you. I would hate to quote them off the top of my head right now, but I can get them for you. Mike Andrews?
Generally,
Go ahead.
Not that many. I don't know. I can't even wager a guess. I've been looking at more of a trend over time than last year to this year, but I have.
Is there anyone else with any comments on the agenda this evening? Hearing none, we'll move on with the agenda and the committee reports. Mrs. Smith is not here this evening, so Mrs. Kehoe, would you take education, please?
Sure. I'd like to move for the adoption of items 1 through 6.
I have a motion on the floor under Education and Technology for items 1 through 6. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Keeper. Is there any discussion? If not, may I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Keeper?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mrs. Locker?
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan?
Yes.
Mr. Sass?
Yes.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Finance and Budget, Mr. Sass, please.
Thank you. I make a motion for the adoption of items 1 through 10 as enumerated on the agenda.
I have a motion for items 1 through 10 under Finance and Budget. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mylan. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Keeper?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes on everything, no on item 6.
Thank you. Mrs. Locker?
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan?
Yes.
Mr. Sass?
Yes.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Kowal's not here this evening for Building and Grounds, but there are no items for vote. Mrs. Fisher, anything for athletics?
I have no voting items this evening.
All right. Mrs. Mylan, Public Relations.
Nothing to report this evening.
Thank you. Steering and Rules, Mrs. Kehoe.
Yes, I'd like to move for the adoption of item number 1.
I have a motion for item number 1 under Steering and Rules. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Locker. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Keeper?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mrs. Locker?
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan?
Yes.
Mr. Sass?
Yes.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Legislative, Mrs. Kehoe?
No voting items this evening.
Thank you. Salary Schedule and Labor Relations, Mrs. Locker.
I move for the adoptions of items 1 through 3.
I have a motion for items 1 through 3 under Salary Schedule and Labor Relations. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mylan. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Keeper?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mrs. Locker?
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan?
Yes.
Mr. Sass?
Yes.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Personnel, Mr. Keeper.
Yes, Mr. President, I make a motion to adopt items number 1 through 30 underneath personnel.
I have a motion for items 1 through 30 under Personnel. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Kehoe. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Keeper?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mrs. Locker?
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan?
Yes.
Mr. Sass?
Yes.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Solicitors report this evening?
There's nothing additional to report.
Thank you. Dr. Welder, Superintendent's report.
I would just like to report that we had a fantastic opening celebration this morning. The marching band was here. Elementary students did the pledge. Our MJROTC also came out with the colors. And we had professional development the rest of the day. We have professional development with all of the teachers tomorrow. And we are excitingly awaiting our students on Monday.
All right, thank you. Old and new business. It is now time for old and new business. Any district resident who desires to comment on any business relevant to the Ambridge Area School District should now come forward. Each person must state their first and last name and address prior to speaking. Each person will be allowed 3 minutes and can speak only once. So if there's anyone with any issues, please come forward.
Jim Ware, Economy. In your presentation, you talked about $750 being paid. How is that going to be paid? Once a month, so much, or is there a lump sum payment at the beginning, at the end? How are you going to do that?
Okay, so there's two 750 figures in that first
One
year.
on, one off.
One is a lump sum bonus payment, all paid at one time. It's not spread out. It's here's a check for 750.
Is that the beginning of the new contract then?
Yeah, that's probably we'll issue to them. If they, I tell you what, if they approve the contract, we'll get it to them as fast as we can. I'll make that representation.
That's fine.
Hope that's okay. And then the salary, the 750 on scale is spread out with their payments, the same way any other salary.
Well, I was curious
disbursement
about the one-off schedule.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
Yep.
Good evening, Travis Minard, Director of Special Education for the Ambridge Area School District, and also Act 93 Chairperson. And the administration would like to thank the school board for approving the Act 93 agreement this evening. We think it is a very good agreement for both the school district and the administration, and we greatly appreciate your continued support. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with any item this evening? Okay. Seeing no one, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned.